The old civilization. What is it really? Why did it fall? When did it exist? How does it relate to Khaenri'ah? Who were the ones living in it? And where are the remnants of it on modern day Teyvat? Ever since the beginning of the game, us lore enthusiasts were convinced that there was an ancient civilization before the 7 nations of Teyvat. But we never really figured out any more on what it was or how it came to an end. We knew that Khaenri'ah was a thing, but we had our speculations that the ancient civilization predated even Khaenri'ah. So we were pretty much in the dark. Well, that was the case until enkanomiya was released. As we all were being disappointed with the lack of lore content in the Arpon quest, enkanomiya hit us like a truck. Us discovering the Byakuya book series was as grand as Abraham receiving the tablets that held the 10 commandments. It was as great as Buddha finally achieving enlightenment, and it was as bright as Aberaku turning on the Helios for the first time. Haha, Genshin lore reference. This book has quite literally changed the entire game. Many theories were confirmed, many theories were disproven, and more theories arose as this book came along. It gave us answers, yet also gave us more questions to ponder upon, for it finally gave us more details on what the ancient civilization was like. So, let's delve deep into the old civilization and try to untangle this chaotic mush of lore hidden in the hints this game gives us. In this video, first and foremost, I will mostly talk about the unified civilization, its inspirations, how it operated, where it is now, and a little bit of its relations to the other ancient civilizations like Khaenri'ah. I'm also going to preface here that this video will be going with the narrative that the second who came won against the primordial one. So, we all know that every nation in Teyvat is designed after or inspired by real-world culture. Mondstadt is inspired by Northern European cultures, Liyue is inspired by Chinese culture, and Inazuma is inspired by Japanese culture. For the other nations, we're going into speculation territory here, but most likely, Sumeru is inspired by Middle Eastern culture, Fontaine is inspired by France's early industrialization era, Natlan was inspired by pre-Columbian cultures, and Snezhnaya is inspired by Russian culture. So I think it's safe to say that the old civilization was probably inspired by a real-world culture as well. And more importantly, I think that inspiration was the Greco-Roman world. Yes, you heard that right. The classical antiquity of the Greco-Roman world. I mean, it just makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? That if you look at the culture and everything, it just kind of does. First, let's look at the music. Wait, no, I mean, let's listen to the music. Every nation has different music styles based on the culture it's based on. If we listen to Liyue's BGMs, we can hear many traditional Chinese instruments like the guzheng and erhu. Mondstadt is also the same, where they use instruments from the Middle Ages such as the harp, flute, and lyres. Now, if we go to the Chasm undergrounds or enkanomiya, we hear a totally different style of music from where they are supposed to be located at. You'd expect enkanomiya's OST to have traditional Japanese instruments, but no. The OST heavily uses pianos, violins, and cellos. The same goes for the Chasm Underground's OST. Instead of being inspired by traditional Chinese music styles, we get a classical music-styled soundtrack. And classical music, though it didn't really happen during the classical era civilizations because it happened like 1700 years later, classical music is still part of classicism and classical antiquity. In addition to this theory, when we look at the names of the shades of Tokayo, some of them had names that was inspired by Greek or had Greek etymology. For example, Clymene, Daimon, and Adonis. The rest of the shades also have names that are Greek but is remade into Inazuman tongue. One example of this is Eboshi, whose real name is Erebos, but in Inazuman tongue, it would be Eboshi. He says this himself in one of his dialogues. More examples of this are Aberaku, Abrax, Supadanohiko, Spartacus, and literally the entirety of the Sun Children, whose names came from the sons of the Greek sun god Apollo. Fitting because, they are the Sun Children. Ion, Isumenasu, Orupeusu, Piramumon, Rikoru, Risutaiso, and Surepio would respectively be Ion, Ismenus, Orpheus, Philemon, Lycorus, Aristeus, and Asclepius. Even the name of the Dainichi Mikoshi, which was originally called the Hyperion. The name Hyperion in Greek mythology is one of the 12 Titan children of Gaia and the Titan god of heavenly light. Another name that the Dainichi Mikoshi has is Helios, which was given by Mr. Abrax himself. The name Helios is also in Greek mythology, and he is the god and the personification of the sun. He is also the son of Hyperion, but since both are sun gods, everyone during that time kind of considered them as the same person, so that's a thing. Another reference that the old civilization has to the Greco-Roman world is the language that can be found in many things that relate to the ancient unified civilization. Many people call it the Abyss language, but I think this is just a language that was heavily used during the ancient civilization. This language is also, mind you, a Latin-based language. The characters are based on Latin letters, and the words and grammar are also based on classical Latin. And wouldn't you know it, Classical Latin was the literary standard of writers during the Roman Empire era. One example of the usage of this Latin-based language is this mysterious letter that we find in the Nameless Ruins. If we decipher it and turn the characters into letters, we can see that this poem was written in Latin. And we also find out that this is a poem that was heavily derived from Catullus 58b, which was written by a Roman poet named Catullus. This poem also mentioned Khaenri'ah, but I'll get to that later. More examples of this are literally found everywhere in Teyvat. They're in chests, monoliths, domains, the Teyvat chapter storyline preview, the secret messages in the Chasm, and so much more, all written with classical Latin grammar. Okay, that's cool. Those are cool and all, but here's kind of the part where my theory falls short. Ancient ruins in Teyvat that relate to the unified civilization usually have a very geometrical, sharp-edged, and acute architectural designs. But ancient classical architecture in the real world was very rounded, curved, and arced, not at all close to what the unified civilization had, so I really can't connect those two. What I can do, however, is explain why the ancient civilization of Genshin built it this way. And this is kind of segueing into the part of the video where I talk about how the ancient civilization operated, so brace yourselves. The reason why ancient Greco-Roman architecture used a lot of arcs and vaults and domes was because it was very sustainable and strong. Another factor is that they thought the circle looked cool, but mainly it was because of its sturdiness. Now, as for the reason why the unified civilization had very pointy kind of architecture, I think it is mainly because the Primordial one provided anything and most of the necessary materials the humans needed. In volume 2 of the Byakuya collection, it says this: "The year of the ark's opening, the people worked the land, and so came the first harvest. The people mined, and so reaped the first crop of precious ore. The people gathered, and the first poems were written. The year of Jubilee. If there was hunger, the heavens would bring down food and rain. If there was poverty, the earth would bring forth its riches. If melancholy were to spread, the heavens would reply with their voices. The one taboo was to succumb to temptation, but the path to temptation had already been sealed." So basically, the people of the unified civilization were spoiled by the Primordial one, and they were probably given a very viable and strong material to make their architecture with, seeing as which their buildings literally still stand till modern day Teyvat, even though it has been through so much destruction and cataclysmic events. So, since they were so rich and had so much to work with, why shouldn't they use triangular sharp edge designs, you know? Why shouldn't they embed literal gold into their walls? They just kind of flexed all their wealth in front of our faces, basically. I mean, you know, more power to them, but I guess their god was a really chill dude, so they were chilling too. Well, that was the case until the second who came. As the second who came and the Primordial one battled, everyone who was a member of the unified civilization was driven underground, which explains why enkanomiya is a thing and all that. Everyone in the civilization died off and disappeared, so that was kinda it. Were we able to reverse time? Alright, that's cool. Hold on a second here. If everyone was driven underground or died off, then how do you explain Khaenri'ah then? Were they a part of the ancient civilization, or were they separate from the unified civilization? Well, yes, but also no. I do think that Khaenri'ah knows what the unified civilization was, but I don't think they were inherently a part of its destruction. I would say that Khaenri'ah was a branching out of the ancient civilization. If the unified civilization was the Roman Empire, then Khaenri'ah would be the Byzantine Empire, which survived the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Khaenri'ah uses the same language, had the same culture, and even a similar architecture as Dainsleif mentioned. This also works as to why Khaenri'ah loves boasting about how they are a godless kingdom, because they know that the second who came won the battle. They made it their whole shtick that they don't have a god and, spited the second who came. Picture this. A nation that has lost their god to a second god, resulting in them wanting to spite the second god by not accepting them and going against them, boasting about how they don't need them, to the point they would even try to overcome the heavens and liberate the world from the second god's shackles. So that's what I think the old civilization was like, and its other connections and stuff. My next video will also be related to this one, since it's going to be about the primordial one. So stay tuned for that.